This is the Raw and Radical Woman in the Arts podcast, and I am your host, Maureen Broadbeck.
Raw, unprocessed.
In each episode, we explore the mechanisms of identity, vulnerability, authenticity, empowerment, and social change through conversations with inspiring women who are making history and challenging the status quo in both the art world and in society.
Radical, rebel. Progressive.
We talk about their real-life challenges and celebrate cis and transgender women so that you can be inspired, empowered, take action, and further your critical understanding about what it means to be a woman in the arts.
Woman, feminism. A revolutionary catalyzing reformation. Radical.
Welcome to the second part of my conversation with Jessica Backhaus. For the ones that did not listen to the first part, this is an original two-parts episode. Jessica is considered as one of the most important voices in German contemporary photography. Her work has been exhibited internationally in numerous solo and group shows, such as in the National Portrait Gallery in London, the Martin Gropius Bau in Berlin, the Martha Herford Contemporary Museum of Art, Architecture and Design in Erfurt. Her work is published in many books. The publisher Kerrer Verlag in Heidelberg has published 8 monographs of her work. Her work is in many art collections, such as the art collection of the Museum of Fine Arts in Houston, the Margulis collection in Miami, the art collection of Tannhaus Sparkasse in Bad Homburg, the art collection of the Deutsche Börse in Frankfurt, and also the Hing art collection in Brussels. Her latest work, Cutouts, was just exhibited at her gallery in Berlin, the Robert Mora Gallery. She is represented by 8 galleries listed in the show notes. Please welcome Jessica back. Hi Jessica, welcome back to the show. We're doing this second part because in the first part we did not talk about your work, and I am quite interested to talk about your work. Through your work, you research new means of expression, and your work is very abstract, minimalistic, very colorful. Can you talk about your practice?
Well, in a way, I think my whole work has been a whole process, like a journey, because when I started doing my first project, I was more or less, 20 years ago. I was 30. So I decided not to go down that road of commercial assignments.
Yeah.
I really wanted to develop my own personal projects and see how far I can go and if that will allow me to make a living. And at the time I was living in New York, and my mother and her partner, they have bought this old farmhouse in a village in Poland. And so for many years back in the 90s, because they bought that house a few years after the wall came down. So in the 90s, I spent many summers and winter there in this Polish village. And I must say I was quite intrigued because in a way it was in such a contrast to my life in New York. I was intrigued and very interested how the people live in a Polish countryside.
Yeah.
And I thought I wanted to make a project, and I started because I was not fluent by all means. I was definitely not fluent in the Polish language, so I was always trying to help and communicate myself with the little Polish I could speak and with the help of a dictionary. And so I started going to our neighbors because it's a tiny village, it has a few houses. And I started going there and was asking if I could take pictures of their environment, of how they live. But no portraits, just the still lifes and the interiors. And they didn't quite understood why I was interested, but I tried to explain to them what I wanted to do. And in a way, I invited them to be part in the process, meaning that when I took the pictures, I went back to New York, I developed all the film, and I made prints. So each time when I went back, I gave them all the prints so they could follow my work, and they saw what I saw because they were thinking, why are you interested in our kitchen? What is there to see? Yeah. It's a kitchen. And in a way, it was wonderful that I gave them the prints because they were really quite enchanted and they had never seen their home in this kind of way. What happened then, it was like a snowball effect that our neighbors and the other people in our village then said, oh, I have a sister, I have a brother, I have a grandfather, I have my uncle.
Excellent.
And within the next 4 years, I worked in the whole region.
Wow.
And I had entrance to all the different houses and apartments because having had the reference, they trusted me. And I spent time with them and I tried to explain them my work. And it was such a beautiful gift they have given me. Then after a while, commuting back and forth between New York and this Polish village, I realized I really want to include the people.
Yeah.
I couldn't imagine not having the people also in the project. So that's when I started adding the portraits. And that was my first project, Jesus and the Cherries, where I'm mixing portraits, still lifes, interiors, a few landscapes. For me, in a way, it was a very important project, like all first projects for any kind of creative person. When you create something for the first time that is meaningful and valuable for you, of course, you have a particular emotional attachment. And my hope was to publish a book and then hopefully, if I have a book, maybe have some exhibitions. So I was looking for a publisher. I found then a publisher at the Frankfurt Book Fair. It was quite an undertaking because I had made a list of 50 publishers who I was interested in.
Yep.
And a friend of mine had the brilliant idea of going to Frankfurt to the book fair because all the publishers are there. And then you can hopefully make some presentations. But of course, it was naive because at a fair, people want to sell the books that are there. Nobody wants to look at portfolios or dummies. But I guess it was a different time. And I managed to see 48 publishers.
Nice.
And
wow, that's a lot.
It was intense. It was intense and crazy. But I also felt that my life was dependent on hopefully finding a publisher because I realized if it doesn't work, then I have to quit photography. And I didn't want to quit photography. So the last publisher, number 48, is a German publisher. And he literally, the last day of the fair, he says, okay, I'm going to take a chance. It's a big risk, but I'm just going to go for it.
Nice.
It was beautiful. So we did the first book. And what was beautiful is that they gave me the complete freedom to do it as I wish. Because I had a collector's edition with Polish porcelain and sugar and spoon. And even the regular edition, we could wrap the whole book in a Polish tablecloth made out of plastic. It was quite an undertaking. And for me, I was just so happy because, yes, the dream has come true. But also what I realized then is it's incredible how books have a different life than exhibitions. Books travel in such an amazing way and they tell the whole story and they stay. And exhibitions, they're there for a moment. They're really intense and you see the work, the objects, the prints. But then it comes and goes. It has this quality that is more vanishing, éphémère.
Yeah, they're very important in the photography world, contemporary photography. Books are very important.
Yes, I agree. Because maybe there's this whole narration attached to it. All of a sudden, I started being approached by galleries and collections and I realized that I was able to make a living just with that work. And at the beginning, even before I had gallery representation, different collectors or collection were approaching me. So in the first 1-2 years, I didn't have to give the percentage away. So I could really put money aside and try to invest then in new work. I never knew if it's going to last, this whole adventure. But what happened then is that I developed other projects. And I guess looking back in the evolution of my work, Jesus and the Cherries was maybe the work which was the most documentarian, photojournalistic, and where I did portraits. I have never done portraits ever since. And more I was going in, into just working with still lifes. And I was taking pictures as I saw. I never did any mise en scène. I really just created the composition. And then later on, I guess 7 years ago, when I started working on a project called 6 Degrees of Freedom, it's the first time that I was wondering, because I imposed myself that rule. I said, I never want to touch anything. I just want to capture it as I see it. But then I thought, I think I want to break my own rule and want to be more loose and see what happens if I create a still life on my own. So I tried, and I must say I wasn't really that successful, because the still lives that I created were in a way not convincing. I didn't believe in them. They were not good. It was a step, even the failure was a step forward. The failure allowed me to go and look for other ways of how I could develop new work.
Yeah, so important,
Speaking about failure, people are so afraid of making mistakes, but I guess with age, getting older, having experiences, I think mistakes are a good thing, and failing sometimes is a good thing, even though at the time it's painful, and of course it's not comfortable, it's not pleasant, but I think a failure is a good thing, because it brings you then to something else that maybe is good.
And I think failures are so important, because allowing failure often brings you to happy mistakes and brings you to new direction that you would have never tried. And it's putting yourself in that position of being really uncomfortable. Because if you spend a day working on something and it really is bad, then you're like a bit bummed, right? You're hoping for something good that really pleases you and is meaningful to you, but then you fail, and then you keep going, and then you discover new territories. And I really like that.
And that moment is just pure magic, because I think over the years, you develop your own relationship and your own critical point of view towards your own work.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
You being an artist yourself, you know those self-doubts, and you question and you think, what the hell am I doing? Who cares? I mean, and I think even those doubts, these questions, I think they're just so part of it. And it's good that we have doubts about our own work, that we question our work. I think it's really a necessity in many ways.
Yeah, it's healthy. Yeah.
So, yes, I guess then over the years, I've allowed myself to do mise en scène. And it's interesting, when I did some of the earlier projects, I had a conversation with a man who was very dear to me. He's no longer, unfortunately, alive. His name is Jean-Christophe Amann, and he used to be the director of the Museum of Modern Art in Frankfurt and also of other museums in Switzerland. And I had the good chance to meet him very early in my career in 2006. And I remember one conversation, I think it was around 2008. And he says, maybe you're not going to believe me what I'm telling you now, but I can see that there will come a time in your life when you will end up in complete abstraction. And I looked at him and I couldn't really understand. And he says, I can see in your images that there is a profound longing for abstraction. And it's just a matter of time, and you will end up in abstraction. And so I wish I could have conversations with him now, because here I am now. When I just think I have landed in abstraction. For more figurative, I made a evolution, a process into abstraction. And yes, that's where I am at the moment. It started more with a project trilogy where I ventured into the abstraction. But I think now with the current project, the cutouts, I think I'm really in it. What is interesting about these cutouts is they have such an abstractional allure. But in a way, they are very concrete. They are what they are. you know, I mean, it's really these various papers that I've cut. And here again, what we were just saying a little bit earlier, my idea was, because I'm fascinated by this whole art form that is collage. Years ago, if you would have told me maybe one day I want to experiment with collage, I would have said never in the world. I could not imagine that. But that's the beauty, that we change. We change our perspective. Yeah. We as human beings, we change. And I think it's wonderful to embrace these changes, embrace the change. I think it's really one of the most beautiful things we can do. How I then started the cutouts is I started cutting my own photographs, which again, years ago, like I just said, never in the world I would have accepted that or think I would do that. So I was cutting my own photographs and thinking how I can create collage with them. And I realized it's quite complex and it was new territory for me. Yeah. It's an ongoing process, work that I'm working on, but it's quite complex. And the interesting thing is with collage, it's so different than the pure act of taking a photograph. You take a photograph, you take the photograph, but with a collage, whatever you put together, if it's photographs, papers, tape, whatever material you wanna put in your collage, there's this fine line of adding too much or not too little. And it's something that you don't create in a tenth of a second. You work with your hands and it needs time. And it's so interesting how it's a different process. And again, it's so easy that you can fail because too much or too little, and the whole thing is destroyed. And that is interesting, how to develop a sensibility of how much is needed, or you go with the whole principle, less is more. And it's so wonderful what happens in your brain, in your visions, in your heart when you work on these collage. And I think they're quite complex, an interesting process. During that time I was experimenting, I also had all these different papers, colored papers, and I thought, I want to do something with them too. So I ended up cutting and cutting and cutting different forms and shapes in a very organic way. And my initial idea was to photograph them, either on a photograph or in this case, even more minimalistic, on a colored background. So I laid them out in the broad sunlight. I didn't want to work with artificial light. I wanted to work with the sunlight. And so it took me some time to get my camera ready. And I realized when I was ready to take my pictures of these different paper cutouts, nothing was like I imagined. Because what happened in the meantime, because the paper was, for the majority of it, quite transparent and delicate, so the heat of the sun made the paper curl and, make these different shapes. And in any case, I was quite annoyed at the beginning, and I thought, this is not how I envisioned it. What's going on? I was thinking, this can't be true. And then I thought, stop, look really what's happening in front of you. And then I thought, but this is wonderful. The whole plan was kind of gone, and I just witnessed something very beautiful, how the paper was reacting to the heat. And all of a sudden, there was this whole interplay between shadow and light and the colors and the forms. And I thought, this is extraordinary. This is really quite something. And pretty quickly then, I forgot all what I wanted to do, and I decided, no. This is what I want to do. And it was a happy accident, a happy coincidence. For the last 3 years, I dedicated myself to these cutouts. And I must say, it was an incredible experience working on them. Also because I am somebody, I can't live without colors. It is really something in my life essential.
I can tell.
I need colors in my life. In every possible way, my obsession is with color, my passion. And so doing this work with these paper cutouts, where in a way it is an homage to color, but how also what I found fascinating, when different colors come together And sometimes it works or it doesn't work. I mean, it was a whole fascinating learning process. I think colors are emotions. They dived in this color world for 3 years. When I worked on these cutouts, there were days I could feel in my energy that it was doing something to me physically, emotionally. And it is something that I really embrace.
I think they're fascinating and beautiful. You published a book, you went to Paris Photo, you have exhibition with this series. How was this experience for you? Because it's almost like a whole relationship.
Well, the thing is, the question I get asked a lot, oh, it's a lockdown project. And I'm like, no, it's not a lockdown project at all, because I started this work in January 18. So it was 2 years before the pandemic started. And the experience was because then in 20, I had done a lot of the work in 18 and 19. But then because the pandemic started in 2020 and the first maybe half year or the first year was not so easy to travel, therefore, I really was much more time at home where I work, because I used to have an atelier, but I lost it this year. So I don't have one anymore. So I'm working from home. And so it really was interesting to have this time where you're not distracted by traveling or other engagements.
For sure.
I was really being able to focus and concentrate all my energy on these cutouts. And in a way, I'm really grateful the way it turned out. Then we were producing the book last spring. And for me, always when I've worked on a project more or less 3 years, for me, the first step is always the book. And I work with a wonderful graphic designer. She's based in Leipzig. Her name is Hannah Feldmeier. And so when I went to Hannah's studio to work on the book, I had a lot of respect, because we have done previous books in the past. She has designed all my books. But I said, this one, it's going to be really difficult, because it's not a book, let's say, a typical conventional, traditional photo book where it tells a story, so to speak, you know, and how you make an interesting book that it's not becoming too repetitive or boring. I thought this will be really, really tricky. And she has this gray magnetic wall in her studio, and we were working on the sequence. And then she put the white vacant pages next to it. And we both were shuddering and having a physical reaction and thinking, this doesn't work at all. It looks terrible. I said, no. We can't do the book like that. And we were really in front of a challenge, thinking, how we gonna put these cutouts in book form? And then I said, take out the white pages again. Because she had this dark gray wall, I said, it's so beautiful on this dark gray, because they're like just illuminated. And when you put the white, there's nothing in it. They're erased. Anyhow, it was a beautiful book production. And then pretty quickly, we decided to have the whole book in these dark anthracite pages and just have the cutouts glow. It really worked, because I thought this is exactly what I went back to my childhood. I grew up in theater, and I thought this is like being in a theater or in a concert or in a movie. When you're in a concert, theater or movie, everything around you is dark, and you just have the screen or the stage. And I thought, this is it. The whole book will be immersive. The whole book you will be dark, but just what is allowed to come out, and we give it a stage and can shine, are the cutouts. And I was so happy when we came to that conclusion. Then we did the book, and the book came out in May. And so I was really looking forward to having the possibility to show the work again. And with the gallery here in Berlin, with Robert, we got invited by a man, Olivier Pidou. He has an art space in Arles called the ICs, and we got invited to do a show, and that took place during the photography festival in Arles. So we knew then that the cutouts would premiere there. And I remember it was the first trip where you physically traveled again.
Yeah.
I remember the day of the open. I mean, we had a soft opening, but I was really nervous because you must know that too, or feel this when you worked on something and then you bring it out for the first time in the public.
Oh, yeah.
You have this anticipation, you have hope, you have this beautiful nervous energy, and I'm always quite emotional. And I thought, oof, how this is going to work. And and then I thought, just let go. You have done everything you can. Now you just have to let go and see what happens. And it was, I must say, such a beautiful beginning of this tour of presentations, because it was the first festival and people were so happy to be able to see exhibitions again in real time, and having the chance to encounter and have conversations. And I must say that was a beautiful beginning of these representations. So it was wonderful to encounter the people who visit the exhibition and having conversations with them. And I was very lucky that with Robert, who represents me here in Berlin, that he thought, well, let's make a whole tour in the fall if the fairs are taking place. That's how we ended up then doing Photo London, Photo Basel, and it was, of course, quite an exception to have these solo presentations. It was
wonderful.
We're very privileged and lucky.
Yeah, this is great. It's really a great journey to travel with your work in so many places. Yeah.
Oh, it's really a huge privilege. And when I create, for the majority of the time, I'm always alone by myself. Yeah. So I'm really happy then that I have wonderful people that I work with that represent my work, giving my work the platform that I can share it with people. Yeah. And the same with a publisher. You have a publisher, and through the book you can share your work. And it's great when you have good relationships where they give you the freedom, they support you, they trust you. For example, here in Berlin, Robert is somebody who really likes his gallery space. It's a beautiful space, but the walls are traditional white. It works for the majority of the works, and it's beautiful. And because I'm so color obsessed, I always think, I want to integrate more color in the presentations. And so with this show, I said, I would love to have some color on the walls. And Robert, he just had renovated his gallery. He says, no. There's not coming any colored paint on the walls. I just renovated it. And I said, but let's see. Maybe I will find a solution. So I did some research, and then I found this beautiful colored matte foil. And I did a presentation to Robert, and I showed it to him. And I said, look, wouldn't it be great to have these cutouts on these color fields? And he liked the presentation, and he said, okay, let's give it a try. But even for that, I'm so grateful that he let me experiment with his gallery, with his walls, that I could try a different kind of presentation. And honestly, up until last week, I didn't know if it's going to work or not. But even just that, I loved. It was new territory, trying something else, see if it works. And I think that you have to push yourself. You have to try and experiment. And maybe it works and maybe it doesn't. But I really think you got to follow your intuition and instinct.
Yeah, and I think it's with exactly these kind of collaborations that we can really grow and evolve and take our place, take our space. And this is wonderful. I was wondering if you have a last word of advice for any other artists or photographers to create those relationships, to make them happen, to keep them alive, to initiate them.
Well, I think when you want to take that artistic path of creating books, exhibition, installations, ideally you want to have a publisher or good publishers, and you want to have good galleries. I mean, everything starts with the work. I mean, you really have to pay attention to your work, and you have to be fiercely dedicated. You have to be disciplined. You really have to make it a priority and really go deep, go beyond, and really work hard. And then the next step, you want to find people that are beautiful. I mean, in an ideal world, that they're good, beautiful human beings and they're very professional. So that combination, it is possible, but I think it's very important that you do research, that if you are interested in a gallery, you look at the various galleries that are out there, you do your research, and then you see what artists they represent, what kind of program they have, and then you try, if it's possible, to meet them and see if there is a connection, if you like each other as human beings, because in a way, you're sitting in the same, it's very important because you're sitting in the same boat, you're collaborating, you're doing things together, and that person, when you're not around, is representing you and your work. So you want to have somebody that you completely are behind and vice versa. So it's a very important relationship that you have to pay attention to. And once you have that relationship, well, again, it's trust, it's respect. And ideally, you want to have a relationship where you can, in a very open and safe way, communicate, where the gallerist or you can say, because there will be challenges and there will be, sometimes there will be hard times, not so easy times, and then there will be good times. So it's really important to have a transparent and open and safe, caring, respectful relationship. And I think in terms of it all, like in general, I think it's really good not to be afraid. It's a little bit what we said earlier. It's really good, I think, to stay curious, to stay alive, to experiment, to fail, to make mistakes, and really trust and dare and see what you can do. Because I think it's so important to not become too comfortable. If you're becoming too comfortable, I don't think it's so good for your work. It's good to be a little bit on the edge,
Yeah, absolutely.
The whole thing is a journey.
Thank you so much.
Well, it was my pleasure.
I hope this conversation was inspiring and insightful for you. Thank you so much for listening, and stay tuned for more uplifting and inspiring conversation with Raw and Radical Women in the Arts podcast. This podcast is supported by Pro Helvetia, the Swiss Arts Council, the Republic and Canton of Geneva, and the city of Lancy in Switzerland. We are so thankful for their support and commitment to women, culture, and the arts. Thanks for listening to Raw and Radical Women in the Arts podcast. Learn more about our featured artists and sign up for news and updates by visiting our website, rawradical.com.
Organic, radical, profound.
Please consider leaving us a comment and review on your preferred podcast listening platform to help others discover the show and take part in this global dialogue.
She, intuitive.
I am Maureen Broadbeck, and until next time, keep the dream alive.
Woman.